It wasn't an algorithm. You need to understand that first. The images and sounds you were shown, the cryptic numbers that appeared in your recommendations, that was a signal, a tuning fork resonating with something already inside of you. You were chosen because you are one of the few who senses that the reality we see is just a fraction of the whole story, a beautiful, hypnotic, but fragmented echo. For months, you've been collecting those echoes, feeling their power without understanding the source. Consider this video the first translation of that source. This is not another theory or a guess. This is the blueprint, the very architecture of the philosophy you've been subconsciously drawn to. What you are about to see is the key that elevates you from a mere spectator of the mystery to an active participant in its unfolding. The puzzle pieces are in your hands. Now, let's begin to assemble them.
There is a point where reality stops mirroring the world and begins duplicating it, reformulating it, rewriting it without warning. It is not a physical place, nor a precise event, but a threshold crossed with eyes open and without realizing it. That is where the real begins to bend, where coherence flickers, where things, though seemingly identical to themselves, start to vibrate at a different frequency, as if something had quietly shifted the source code, causing everything to run along a slightly misaligned parallel trajectory. They call it the Mandela Effect when they want to give it a manageable name, a kind of collective amnesia, a slip in memory. But beneath that label stirs something far more dizzying. The possibility that reality is being rewritten in real time, and that what you remember has simply been overwritten, without notice or backup, by a version better suited to the current present. As if a central system had decided to update the storyline, keeping the interface intact while silently changing the events stored beneath. Memory becomes a temporary file, volatile, governed by optimization logics you don't know, and that perhaps aren't even human. Imagine a shared document, always open and regularly editable. Each observer contributes to its writing, not as a conscious author, but as an assistant recording inputs, desires, interpretations. Every gesture you make leaves a trace. Every thought you form inscribes a new line. But the document is not stable. It changes based on what is written, and what is written depends on what has already changed. In this circular motion, this recursive entanglement of causes and effects, coherence becomes thinner, more aesthetic than logical. At that point, reality is no longer what happens, but what manages to sustain the illusion of continuity. This is metaprogramming, a system that modifies itself as it runs, a code that, while executing its instructions, generates new ones, adapting in unpredictable ways to the context it helps create. And this is not merely a computing theory, it is a powerful metaphor, and perhaps something more. For if a deep architecture of reality truly exists, it cannot be rigid or deterministic. That would make it brittle, doomed to collapse under its own weight. More likely, it is adaptive, mutating, designed with a degree of programmed entropy. And this is not a flaw, but a strategy for self-preservation. Bugs, then, are not enemies to be corrected. They are signals, not anomalies, but symptoms of an ongoing rewrite. Every inconsistency, every moment something does not quite add up, could be the visible trace of a recent change, a silent rewrite with no changelog, no approval, and perhaps not even a central intelligence behind it. Not a secret plan, but a reticular organism, self-regulating through an incalculable number of simultaneous feedback loops. Systems like this already exist today. Machine learning algorithms, neural networks, generative environments, artificial intelligences that do not think so much as respond, adapt, and recalibrate their models based on input. They operate through progressive approximation, capable of failing, correcting, and failing again in even more refined ways. What matters to them is not truth, but performance, apparent coherence, seamless execution. Maybe reality works the same way. It isn't true. It's plausible. It is not deterministic. It's updated. What we call experience may be a personalized rendering, an instantiated version of reality tailored to your observation, your expectations, your story. And each time you observe again, something gets refreshed. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, in the end, says just this: the system knows you are looking and adjusts accordingly. Not to deceive, but because it was built that way. In the oldest esoteric traditions, there is an idea that language can modify reality, that certain formulas, names, and symbols are not merely representations, but operational tools, a performative language capable of acting directly upon the structure of the world. Not metaphor, not poetry, command. Not verb, but vector. Stripped of its mystical attire, this idea may prove surprisingly technical. For if reality is an unstable code, then every utterance potentially becomes a line of instruction. Every thought, an instance. Every emotion, a variable. And you are both compiler and bug, both interpreter and error, both writer and the one written. It is a paradox, yes, but not a dead end. It is a condition, an existential loop that, observed without fear, can even become readable. But be warned, readable does not mean comprehensible. It only means there is a hidden grammar, a syntax of possibility that reveals itself only in fragments, never whole. Like a source code too vast to be read all at once. Like a voice speaking a language you almost know, distorted by dream. The true instability, then, is not in reality. It is in you, in the way you see, remember, name, in the way you respond to errors, deviations, imperfect returns, in the way you choose or refuse to rewrite. And perhaps that is the hidden function of the anomaly, to make you notice, to suspend the automation, to break the flow just long enough for you to ask whether everything you have always considered normal is in fact the result of a long, quiet, invisible collective rewrite. And this is not some kind of conspiracy. It is a necessity. What we call truth is a form of consensus. What we call reality is what works well enough not to be questioned. And what we call error is often just another truth that lost the vote. So do not expect a revelation nor a redemption. There is no moment when everything becomes clear, no descent of a final answer. At best, there is a threshold, a point where you realize you could choose. That you could, even just as an experiment, even as a test, begin to write yourself. Not everything, not from scratch, just one line, a small variation, a different word. Not to fix the code, but to bend it slightly. Not to dominate it, but to dialogue with it. Not to escape it, but to remain within it consciously. To know that each time you say I, a part of the system reconfigures. That each time you believe, the code adapts. That each time you fall silent, something continues to be written anyway. And it is right there, in precisely that space, that you are closest to what you call real. In the moment when you stop commanding and start listening. In the moment when you stop interpreting and begin to record. In the moment when you let the code tremble, and tremble with it, not knowing where it will lead. Because if the real exists, it is a process, and you are the point where that process takes form. Unstable, imperfect, ever-changing, and precisely for this reason, alive. See you in the next episode.